Now that the Trump administration has settled in, two questions have emerged for the congressional delegations, especially near D.C. One concerns the ping pong ball, that is the new FBI headquarters question. Another has to do with the new federal job classification known as career policy. We get one view now from Maryland Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey. Congressman Ivey, good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
And let's talk about that policy, career policy, what used to be known the first time around as Schedule F. And Congress never did get around to passing something to prohibit the existence of that type of schedule. So what's your feeling about how Congress might deal with it now?
Well, I don't know if Congress is going to do much with it. Right now, the president rolled out an executive order with respect to that. I'll call it Schedule F just for shorthand, and also has a number of other executive orders, as your listening audience, I'm sure, has heard about. DEI in particular has been a target. I think that the pushback on that, certainly, politically, we're fighting hard about it, House Democrats anyway, on that front. But the key battleground, I think, is going to be the courts. I think the groups like Democracy Forward, which is a consortium of labor unions and advocacy that have already filed suits seeking injunctions, those seem to be moving forward pretty well. So far, there's a range of suits that have been filed beyond this. Court established injunctions. Your audience may recall that an injunction was put in place for the total cut in funding across the board, and Trump backed away from that. So hopefully we'll be able to win some of these in court as well and push back on him on that front.
But there are 535 members of the House and Senate, and doesn't it seem like for the long-term settlement of issues that a legislative solution to what the federal workforce looks like really is in the best interest of everybody instead of court, because it seems like court is getting drawn into more and more decisions here.
Yeah, I guess the challenge from my perspective, though, is that the Republicans control the White House, the Senate, and the House. So if you got a legislative solution out of that right now, it probably wouldn't look very good for our government employees. I think it would look a lot like stripping them of the rights and protections that they have. Some of those have been protected at some level by regulations the Biden administration put in place before it left. But, I think left to their own devices, the Republicans would strip that away, force out long-serving government servants who have the experience and expertise to do the job right, and replace them with, in my view, political loyalists and, frankly, hacks that Trump wants to put in place just so he can move forward with. I think a lot of his agenda, frankly, is illegal and unconstitutional, and I think we are fighting to block that.
Because in my experience, there have been Republicans in Congress that have been big supporters of the federal workforce over the decades. And so do you feel that there's any path toward a new section of Title V is really where this would happen, that some Republicans could join you enough to get the ball over the line there?
The Republicans in the House and the Senate have been pretty much unanimously silent on these executive orders that attack federal employees. So I'm not sure they're going to be coming to the rescue anytime soon. And if you look across the board at some of the other things, for example, these confirmation hearings, Trump's put up, frankly, some of the most unqualified nominees in the history of the country. This guy Hegseth that's taken over the Pentagon doesn't even know where the bathrooms are, but he cleared. I think 3 Republicans voted against him in the Senate, but he got all the others. And you've got others, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., what's her name? Gabbard, for national, people that have no background, no experience, nothing in their resume suggests they could do the job well. But Trump's putting them up, and the Republicans are moving them through. So I don't know that we can count on them right now at all. I think the court's really the best option we've got, and we need to move forward with that and seek the injunctions to block these efforts.
And speaking of executive orders and administrative actions by the new administration, what are you hearing from your constituents with respect to this deferred resignation gambit, which gives them a deadline of, I think, sometime later this week to decide?
Yeah, I think people are seeing through that at this point. Certainly there's the concept, I guess it's supposed to resemble a buyout, but you'd have to trust Donald Trump to do that. And people ought to know better than that at this point. Certainly most of the folks in my district, I think, would not bet the house literally on trusting Donald Trump. And it's not clear, actually, that what they seem to be proposing they could actually do. I mean, there's one interpretation of this that would be, you submit your resignation and you just get paid for the next 7 or 8 months. But I don't know that he's allowed to do that. We don't have, ghost employees, no-show employees. That's maybe the Sopranos, but not the federal government. And so I think that would be illegal if he tries to do that. And then the other part is, I don't know that we want to let this guy win. He's trying to force legitimate government servants out of their positions so he can replace them with loyalists, party hacks, whatever. And we don't want to do that. The function and the mission of the federal government is too important.
We're speaking with Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey, who represents Maryland's 4th Congressional District. And I want to get to the topic of the FBI headquarters. That seemed to be settled. And last year, Congress appropriated at least a couple of $100 million for site work. And I don't think GSA has actually acquired the land yet to put that in Prince George's County. What are you hearing? They haven't proposed anything specific from the new administration. But the last time they canceled the deal and wanted to just tear down and rebuild in place downtown.
Yeah, it's, last we've heard, actually, it's moving forward. There had been an IG investigation that was launched because one of the members of Virginia had filed a complaint. But that's been cleared up and, there was nothing there. So it's ready to move forward again. As soon as the prospectus gets sent from the FBI to the GSA, the prospectus contains the information, the specifications for the construction. Hopefully that'll move forward. The Trump's out the director of the FBI, Wray, and apparently they did a big reshuffling and force out with respect to senior officials at the FBI. But hopefully the information will come over and they can get moving on that. Obviously, I think everybody's heard that Trump has a beef with the FBI and the Department of Justice overall. So there may be attempts to derail this. But one thing to keep in mind is it costs somewhere around $250 million per year every year that we delay this. So it's not in the interest of the public, certainly from a dollars and cents standpoint. And we can't leave it where it is because we know it's not safe there from terrorist attacks. That's one of the reasons they were talking about moving it to start with.
And regarding the tragic mishap that happened near Reagan Airport the other night, do you think Congress will rethink this addition of 10 flights a day at National Airport, DCA, because this was something that the Maryland and Virginia delegations were united in trying to oppose?
Yeah, I think there's, a consensus at this point that given this tragedy, we need to reassess what's going on there from an air traffic standpoint. I think the complaints that we had raised in the Maryland, Virginia delegations about adding more flights was that it was already overburdened and putting up more flights would make the problem worse. And I think that's clearly been borne out in a very tragic way. Also, I think we need to rethink the military training aspect of this too. You've got Bowling and Andrews nearby. And apparently they do training missions that, overlap in some ways with the commercial flight patterns and paths that go to National Airport. That needs to be reassessed as well. So we got to get to the end of the NTSB investigation, make sure we know exactly what was the cause. And if they make recommendations about how to fix it, I definitely would want to see those. But I think everything about that needs to be on the table at this point.
All right. What else is at the top of your mind? Everybody's waiting to see what happens as the continuing resolution sort of creeps closer and closer. Now we're just about 6 weeks away. Then you've got March 14th coming up. I don't hear a lot going on. Is it happening in the background, some kind of budgetary talks?
Not like it should be, frankly. I think the Trump administration has sucked most of the air out of the room with respect to the discussions that should be happening right now. There are some discussions, but, at the end of the day, the bottom line is going to be whether the Republicans start trying to take everything up to the cliff again with respect to debt ceiling and keeping the government open. I think there's a significant contingent in the House Republican caucus that want to shut the government down. And, so we're not out of the woods on that front. And we also need to keep in mind that a big piece of the Trump administration's agenda is reinstating or, extending the tax cuts that were put in place primarily for, very, very wealthy Americans. And so there's a big transfer of funds coming from working class people to them. He's got to fund that, though, and he's going to try and do it during that negotiation cycle. So it's going to be a big deal. I think it's going to be a Donnybrook fight. We'll have to see how it plays out. But they need to get on it one way or the other because, as you point out, it's right around the corner.
And a final question, a big piece of the IRS